Ayano Saryano Sasrikal. Welcome to the Love, Laugh, Live chat show with myself and Devinder Ruby.
So Pyar Karo Hasote Jug Jug Jiyo Wala show. So this show is about how we love with passion, how we laugh with pleasure, and how we live with peace.
So ਇਹਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਹੈਗਾ ਪਿਆਰ ਕਰੋ ਸਾਰੇ ਦਿਲ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੱਸੋ ਜੀ ਭਰ ਕੇ ਤਾਂ ਜੀਓ ਸ਼ਾਂਤ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ.
So my name is Devinder Ubi and I'm a life and spiritual coach, and sitting next to me my beautiful co-host.
And my name is Vidyal Garcha and I'm an empowerment and resilience coach. So Dav, we're going to be continuing on with our program from last week.
Yes, it was about kindness, Dialta, and it's about the kindness, Dialta, sade kira asar sade penda sare duniya te ki acha asar penda. So we're going to have a little recap of last week's show. So I'm going to mention about when you want to experience more compassion and kindness, you must spread it to those around you. And being kind to others can make you feel good and improves the world. Dunya de bahut acha asar penda when we're being kind to ourselves, and it also helps, attract kindness from yourself and others.
So also continuing on from last week, kindness manifests itself in being nice to others and yourself. So being kind to others involves doing things that make people smile, and being nice to yourself is essential too.
Yes, so today what we're going to discuss other benefits of implementing more kindness in your life. So we'll try and go through this, quite a few, but we'll go through the main ones today. So the first one we're going to discuss is about when we investing more time in being kind, we're actually allowing ourselves to have more healthy heart. So it improves your heart health. So when you engage in a witness or an act of kindness, it triggers this chemical in our body called oxytocin. And oxytocin is a hormone, and where it helps to lower your blood pressure and improves your heart health. The hormone also triggers a release of nitric oxide, so that's dilating the blood vessels and protecting your heart. So as I said, every action we do in our lives, whatever we're focusing on, and that will activate certain glands in our body. So with kindness, being generous to ourselves and others, and especially the hugging part, we find ourselves that automatically our body will send a signal to a gland which will start releasing oxytocin in our body. And the oxytocin actually helps our heart, especially it sort of like helps our arteries in our heart. So if there's any blockage, it starts to clean that blockage out. That's what the purpose of the hormone is. So oxytocin is very, very important in our body, but it all depends on where we're coming from and how often are we kind to ourselves. We find ourselves very rarely that we decide to choose to be kind. We've got a habit of always being unkind and being self-judgmental and always thinking that something wrong with us, saying horrible things about us, berating ourselves. It's not a kind thing to do. So we, at that same time, we are releasing the opposite of oxytocin, more stress hormones that actually block our arteries.
We're talking about, we're just mentioning about hugging, and we know that our parents and grandparents especially were not very tactile people. So, if you kind of go to hug them, especially as you start to grow up, I think when you're children or babies, then that comes as being natural, hugging your child. But as you grow up, I think, our parents and grandparents were so in the survival mode and of being disciplined and authoritarian people within the family that hugging and showing signs of affection wasn't something that came naturally to them. And I remember when hugging my nanny, and she'd be like, bade hat, ki kar diya, hat pare, and all that. And to me that used to be funny. But now when you think about it, it was only because maybe I know that my nanny's mom had passed away when she was about 3, so she was like brought up by other members of the family. So because she had never had that natural hugging affection, she then passed it on to my mom, and I know that my mom wasn't as open to hugging the way we've mentioned.
I think the older generation wasn't, because they were more conditioned that the only way we can keep the family and the community together is to show discipline, is to show we have to have a strict sort of way of functioning throughout life, and that kept us safe. But it wasn't. It was keeping us very unhealthy.
But again, it's just what they knew and
yes,
what they thought that they needed to do, especially coming from a foreign country into the UK. I mean, I'm just thinking of my parents here, and it was a way of keeping the community, culture, religion, all that kind of, keeping ourselves safe, like you've just mentioned. But I think it was also a way of being closed off. So when you wanted to hug somebody, you knew you were not going to get that reciprocated.
No.
So you kind of felt that it was a hug that felt like it was obliged. It wasn't like a really warm hug, if you think about it. And I know consciously that when I hug my children, I want it to be such a warm feeling of, making them feel good, but also going to make me feel good. So it's so important that the benefits of hugging, and I know some people just aren't very tactile. I know I am, because I like hugging people, not random people, but like people who I care and love. But it's so important because it does make you feel loved and cared for by the people that that mean a lot to you.
I mean, if you notice sometimes when you hug a certain person that you feel like you want to repel back, and the reason being there because the person you're hugging, probably they're so shut down and closed from their heart, they're not in the place of feeling kindness towards themselves or the world, or they're full of too much animosity and bitterness, and so those people will not able to like to be hugged, and you can sense that, and you sort of like pull back. But really, if you really wanted to help them, instead of pulling back, you sort of like,
it's like a big bear hug.
Yeah, big bear. Keep hugging them, because they usually say that if you hug एक minute वास्ते तुसी जब भी पाओगे ना, that's when we activate the gland, or the oxytocin starts being releasing into our system, and our heart starts benefiting. And if you think anyone who has heart condition, the more we hug them, the longer we hug them, they can naturally get healed with this hormone, because the hormone naturally does heal the arteries that are blocked. So this is very beneficial to hug someone, especially the ones that are struggling to be hugged, or not especially jade japite dia. And so hugging is something very powerful to do. And not just people hug trees and things, the environment, because it's so much, like you said, natural way of healing ourselves. And so hugging is very important for showing kindness to yourself and kindness to the person who probably is blocked. This is the biggest seva you can do. And I was discussing earlier on about that we as humans sometimes think, maybe the newer generation, that thinking jab bacha ronda hai, that leave them to cry, they got to learn to be strong and learn to sort of like deal with whatever they're going through. But if you think about an animal like a gorilla, or like I say a mother dog or something, if it knows its child is in distress, it'll quickly go and hug it. They know this is a natural thing. A child,
it's an instinct, isn't it?
A child is born into this world, and first start, when it's born, it can't communicate through vocally because it doesn't know how to speak. The only communication is as touch and hug. That's where the child will feel safe. And same with animals, they need to feel safe. But we don't think that child needs to be hugged, so the child instantly starts to condition and start to believe that this world is not safe, there's no love, and hugging is not essential, so my needs cannot be met. So already the child is feeling doesn't feel that kindness is important for itself or others. So from a very newborn baby, it's already being conditioned on a subconscious level. So hugging is very important, because that's the way we stay healthy, and we can learn to be kind to ourselves and kind to the world.
Yeah, I mean, going on from that, I mean, there's two things that kind of came up for me. One was where there were children, I can't remember the country now, but where they were just left in their cots, and slowly they just stopped crying. So what's happening is that emotionally they're closing down, and they're not. And that carries on through adulthood into relationships with other adults, or and with their own children, because there's a part of them that's closed down, and they've never allowed themselves to feel those kind of emotions of feeling vulnerable, or allowing how they really feel out to other people. And it's a really, really sad state of affairs, if because you have got to be willing to look at that side of you and think, well, why am I like this? Can I get some kind of support, some kind of help? Because if somebody's showing me that I'm not ready to love somebody else, really what it comes down to is I'm not ready to love myself, and that's a whole other topic as well. But going back to
just a little bit more about the hugging part of a child. So when now anybody who's listening to this, if you do hear a child cry, you know, it's so important to, you know, because a child doesn't just cry. I mean, it has a need that it has to be met.
100%.
Because a child can only communicate through crying, through laughing, you know, and so its needs has to be met, and hugging them, picking them up, it's very important for a child, because then already that child is conditioned that when it's older, it will play out their behavior throughout all the relationships. So it will learn that my needs are also important, so I'm a valuable person in this world. So if I'm feeling valuable and my needs are met, it can easily attend other people's needs. So that's what we were discussing on our last week's show, wasn't it? So when we're doing an act of kindness, we can only do an act of kindness when we're really feeling the kindness towards ourselves. So if a young child's needs are not being met and we left it to cry, it doesn't know how to attend to its feelings. So it always can be like a people please and grow up always trying to be codependent, seeking everybody else's validation and thinking their needs are not important. So it's important to, when a child is crying, pick them up, make them realize out of kindness that you are very important, precious being on this planet.
And we understand that's hard sometimes when you've got so many other things going on in the house. You know, you might have another child who's older, or, you know, a partner, you got to do the cooking, and so many, you know, responsibilities, and sometimes, you know, that child crying can become something that's just annoying or something. But, you know, we know that picking the child up, giving them space, just letting them know that you're there and that you will go back to them, but just at that moment, maybe you just too busy to kind of attend to them, but just your language, the way you speak, holding them, giving them space, it's so important, because the first 7 years of any child's life are the most crucial, and that is what shapes them as an adult as they go into their later years of how to communicate with other people. And again, it's about when you show them kindness, then your frustration, your sort of the way you're feeling may not be great at that time, but the child will understand that you've attended to them, and then the blood pressure that might be running through your body at that time, trying to juggle all of these different things. It's about being kind to yourself and understanding that everything else, most things can wait, but that child is the most important at that particular time, because there's nothing worse than hearing a child cry and scream for your attention.
There's another beautiful thing I just remembered, that, you know, when at the hospital, when premature babies, very premature babies, what actually heals them, some people do this on a voluntary basis, they go there and just hold the child on their chest, and chota bacha starts to heal very quickly. Why? Because it's close, the hugging is releasing the oxytocin, and it's making the heart and the lungs, it's strengthening them. This is how powerful it is. So, and it works both ways. So let's say the person who's doing the voluntary work on this, or we're getting some healing because the child's on their chest, it's working both ways. So this is, you know, thinking I'm just going to sit there, having a good time, chill out. No, there's something powerful happening there.
I think that's where, you know, that's why they do the skin-to-skin contact, don't they? As soon as the baby's born, they want that connection to be made as soon as the baby's born. And not only with the mother, but with the father as well. Because obviously sometimes, you know, we think that, oh, you know, it's all about the mum, but it's equally important for the father to have that role, you know, if they're around. Going back to heart health, we were just talking, you know, you don't have to do really big things in order to make yourself feel better or make someone else feel better out of an act of kindness. We were talking about, you know, even making someone a cup of tea, you know, the effort that it makes, that it takes, maybe really, really small, putting the kettle on, getting the water on, the milk, the sugar and all that, whatever it is, or Indian tea. But doing that for somebody, and especially if it's your parent or your grandparent, the pleasure that they get just from you doing that small act is so big, and we don't realize it because we're so used to our parents or grandparents doing things for us, and sometimes we're just rushing in and out when we do go and see them, and just to be able to sit down and say, look, you sit down, I'll do this for you. But you would naturally feel so good, but your parent or your grandparent would as well.
I mean, last week when I came back from your program, my lovely daughter just made this, when it's spontaneous sort of act of kindness, that means so much more. And she had this lovely tea made and cake made and dinner, thinking, wow, is it Mother's Day? Felt like Mother's Day. But that act of kindness really opened my heart even more. And both ways. So she felt good and I felt good. Those sort of things are so, precious in life.
That we don't take for granted. I mean, I think as a mother or a father, you naturally do these things. You are giving and you want to do as much as you can to help your children. But when it comes the other way, I think you just appreciate it so much.
You do,
more. I genuinely think that.
Yes.
So the next one is improve self-esteem. So kindness, it improves your self-esteem and optimism. So you'll feel better about yourself and the future when treating others well. So being kind allows you to recognize the good in yourself and see a positive future ahead. So we understand that within relationships there is codependency. If I do something nice for my partner, hopefully he'll do something nice for me, or my friend, or my relation, or my child. It is a cycle, and I don't think it's an unhealthy cycle. I think it's a good thing, to do something, not necessarily in terms of expectation, but to do something out of love.
It's the intention behind your act of why you're doing it. Like we were just saying earlier, you want to do it, not think I should do it. It's the should that it is not coming from a place of kindness. Because should it makes you feel heavy. It makes obligation.
You feel obligation, or there's some judgment there to yourself and to others. Well, I should do this. But whereas if you say to yourself, well, I want to do this, that's coming from a completely different place, because you're choosing to do something out of kindness for somebody else. Whatever that is, wherever you are, to do it from a place of I want to do it, it takes all the pressure off you, and there's no judgment. You're doing it because it's your kind choice.
I mean, if you think about it, when do you find yourself doing from I should? That is when really you're thinking, if I don't do this, then they might won't have anything to do with me, or they probably just want to move on and be friends with somebody else, or they probably just talk about me if I don't do it. So that act of kindness is not coming from a real, genuine, authentic way. It's coming from a place of need, in the sense like, if I don't do this, then I have to deal with the consequence of this act of kindness, which is really, then it's pretense. It's not a real, genuine
coming
act.
From a genuine place, is it?
So when you want to do it because you just feel, I always want to do this because I feel good about it, and just in that moment, just that act of kindness, I just enjoyed that experience. That's it, period. Nothing after that. And when you do it from that intention, then that comes back to you when you least expect it, So, but when you do it from I should, what comes back to you is not kindness. You'll get that same sort of frequency of, I would say, like when people judge you, or people will disrespect you, because that's what you are sending out in the first place.
So it's that feeling, isn't it? A feeling of lightness that you're looking for. You're not looking for feelings of like feeling obliged, because when you feel obliged, you're doing it begrudgingly. You're not doing it because you want to do it. You're doing it because you feel like you have to do it, and you're scared of the repercussions of doing it from a place of obligation. So that's something to think about.
And I think it's also what we've been hardwired or conditioned from a young age as well, where we're not, where we've been conditioned not to like ourselves, we're not important enough. Then it becomes like it's a survival mechanism, just to should do it, in order just to feel accepted by your society. So if you're in a survival mode, that means you're coming from a place of fear. It's not coming from love. So most people do operate from survival mode most of the time, and that's why jealousy, kuch kar diya, whatever, through the survival mode, we will find ourselves always disappointed, always feeling dissatisfaction in your act of kindness, and then we sort of like lose hope, and then we get disheartened, and then we think like, what's the point, kuch karna, and then we go into that place of, just judging ourselves and others.
I mean, and this is where sometimes voluntary work, doing something for others, with no intention of anything coming back to you, even though there is no act of complete kindness, because something will always come back to you. You know, when you're doing something, you'll feel good no matter what. You know, and sometimes listening to others, problems, issues, whatever you want to call it, you are going to get something back, because you're going to feel uplifted knowing that even being a listening ear to somebody within society, within your community, even within your own family. I always think, you know, charity begins at home and not everywhere else. You know, if you can do it within your own home, then you've kind of got it nailed if everybody did it, but that's a personal thing that I've got. But yeah, so think about it in those terms.
So we're going to talk about the next sort of benefit of kindness, the other, which is that the more we implement more kindness, we can feel less depressed, less stressed, and you know, a lot of less of panic and anxiety situations. So the experts say that you'll feel less depressed, stressed and anxious when you make kindness a habit. And it triggers the serotonin, this is another hormone production, a common component of many medical antidepressants. So being nice also improves life satisfaction and self-realization. So the studies show that anxious people experience fewer signs of anxiety after performing regular acts of kindness. It improves their moods and their benefit in their relationships and reduce social anxiety symptoms. So here again, this is another hormone, because like I said, whatever we think about in that moment, our body's always in that communication with our thoughts. There's always a correlation between our thoughts and our body organs and glands and tissues and cells and everything. So when we have that thought, instantly we activate certain glands. So when we're coming from a place of stress and, you know, negative thoughts, we always find ourselves like adrenal glands, you know, where there's more adrenaline and cortisol. But when you're doing an act of kindness, we're releasing more serotonin hormones, and that's a very good hormone to feel healthy again. So yeah, we're talking about what is it? What is these thoughts that we're having that stimulate these glands? And usually it's about the mental diet, you know, the inner conversation that we have is usually, we find ourselves always unkind things we say to ourselves.
And we discussed this at some length before we kind of came onto the show today, and it's what we say to ourselves 24/7, and we said that. We say it to ourselves, but yet we would never say that to your child, your friend, or your family member. So why is it okay to say it to yourself? And this is where I think people are living unconsciously, because they're not monitoring or keeping a check on their thoughts. And your mental diet is so important, because depending on how you feel, that's naturally going to have an impact on your body. You know, if you're constantly saying to yourself, oh, I'm just not that good, or if I'm comparing myself to somebody and saying, oh, you know, she's so much better than me, or he's so much better, then I'm lowering myself in the eyes of that other person. So therefore, there's always going to be an imbalance of somebody who's powerful and I'm powerless. And it's all about thinking about what is it that you say to yourself, and then we talked about how to kind of alleviate those problems.
So just imagine now your child is going through some sort of anxiety or just a worry or concern, and instead of making them feel better, we'll probably say something like, well, when we sort of like judging and being very critical about, you know, well, it's your fault, you should have thought of it better, you know, you should be more clever than the other kids, you should have worked harder, you know, you should have dressed better. You know, we find ourselves, even though we think that we're giving them advice, but we constantly, can you imagine to see constantly doing this to them, judging them, what's going to happen to them? Their inner sort of confidence is going to shrink and deplete, and they're going to feel useless, they're going to feel pathetic, eventually they're going to get so conditioned to thinking that no matter what they do, it's not enough. And
it's
that's
not
when
good enough.
Yeah, it's not good enough, and they're going to end up feeling depressed eventually, because they're constantly, those negative thoughts about them, they're going to be, their body be flooding in all the negative sort of, hormones like, you know, cortisol and adrenaline. So that's when eventually they're going to find themselves in a depressed state and a lot of panic, anxiety situations, because we've constantly berated them and complained to them But that's what we're doing to ourselves. We don't realize that. We always think, oh, I should look better, I should have spoke better, I should have tried harder.
That word, isn't it? It's that word should.
Yeah. Oh, I could have made a bit more effort. Oh, I'm late, I should have got there earlier. We always find ourselves that we complain too much. And then complaining is always kind of leads to that we're not enough, we're not good enough, and we're a disappointment to the people around us, and we're a disappointment to ourselves. So being in this habit of constantly complaining and even gossiping is the worst thing you can do, because it all triggers all these stress hormones in our body. Gossiping, complaining, just being self-critical, judgmental, these instantly activate those glands. And then we're doing it, we don't realize any because jo habit ho jane na, it happens automatically. So it's always running the show, so we find ourselves, so it becomes a normal, it's an addiction. It becomes normal for us to behave that way. And also we were talking about, like you said, addiction. So let's say most of our life, or as we start from a very young age, our body gets used to the certain amount of chemicals that we have. So if we're in a place of being unkind to ourselves and very judgmental, then our body is going to get a high level, let's say 98% of stress hormones just flooding through our system. And let's say we try to, okay, let's try and say something nice to yourself. Let's 24 hours, let's be very conscious of being very positive and about yourself and the world. It doesn't last more than a few hours, because the body starts saying, I'm not used to this extra hormones of serotonin, oxytocin in my body. I'm not familiar with this level of healthy hormones. It's used to the norm of 98% of the adrenaline and cortisol. So the body is so clever, it will send a message to the mind, oh, think of something negative. And you find yourself automatically something negative, and it activate those stress hormones to start flooding your system. It's like it's an addiction. We have an addiction to think negative because the body is used to that amount of chemical in our body, which is like the body's like a drug factory, really.
And we do understand that obviously what we're talking about is coming from a coaching perspective, although Dad's brilliant at the science side of things, and we know that sometimes there's a combination of what people need. There might be therapy, there might be medication, and also coaching. So there's lots of other things, but it's really, really important to understand that when you are in this state, we are talking about kindness, but kindness has always got to start with yourself. And sometimes it's so much easier. It's just like an automatic thing where we're kind to other people, but we forget about ourselves. And if you forget about yourself, then that's the unkindest thing that we can do. And it is an automatic thing where we think, it is a natural thing to think, well, I'm not as good as so-and-so or as so-and-so. I wish I was like this. But it's equally important to think, well, what am I good at? What do I do well? Because if you're going to carry on thinking in those negative terms and become that negative state or depressive state, it's going down that rabbit hole. And if you haven't got anybody that's going to be able to help you to get out of that and talk to you about your positive attributes, then you it's a self-fulfilling prophecy is what I'm saying. You just get darker and darker. Your moods or your thoughts can become so dark, and it can start off really small. And again, we discussed this earlier about when that thought comes, well, how do you actually get out of this state of starting to go down the rabbit, or even being in the rabbit hole? And it's about catching yourself right at the beginning. As soon as that thought comes into your head, you've got to think, okay, what do I need to do here? You need to catch it and think, well, what can I do?
It's usually sometimes because people say, well, if there's a habit and it's automatic, so then how do I know it's even actually happening? Because it's happening subconsciously. So if you think about what's the subconscious mind, it automatically beats, it beats our heart, it does our digestive system, it controls our body temperature. So we're not aware of it consciously. So that's the bit people get confused, thinking, well, if it's a habit, it's happening subconsciously, that our body's used to having certain these chemicals level of stress hormones in our bodies level. So how do we bring the levels down? So the only way we'll know is because the thought comes automatically. It's a sensation, that icky feeling, that feeling of uneasiness, that discomfort. All of a sudden I'm starting to feel a bit off. that is an indicator that the program started running of unkindness. And that's where you have to catch yourself from that sensation in your body, and you're thinking, okay, I'm feeling a bit icky, I'm feeling off, what am I thinking right now? And that's when you catch yourself as soon as you can, and straight away shift that thought or belief or assumption into something on a kind level of, meaning to whatever you're thinking about.
And it is coming out of the habit mind where, these thoughts are just running in the background, and it is about being conscious, because awareness is about being conscious, because we are, like I said, and we always mention this, life is so busy, so fast, we're just running from A to B to C. But being conscious and actually sitting, allowing yourself the time to think, well, what am I actually thinking? Why am I feeling like this? Is it true? Is there something I can do to change the way I'm feeling? What can I do to help myself? And there is always an answer. But sometimes being in that negative state or depressive state, it's the easy option. It's not easy in the sense of feeling good, but doing something that's going to take you out of that negative state is harder than staying in that state. And that's where life can change, but it's going to take time. And I think sometimes it's like exercise, isn't it? We all want to have a really fit body, and you want to kind of be able to go to the gym 2 or 3 times, and in a month's time you want a body that looks amazing, but it doesn't work like that. And being in any kind of negative state or depressive state, it takes time, and that's where the kindness has got to come in. You've got to be kind to yourself, remind yourself of all the things that are great about you, and it's looking at that list of all of your positive attributes as opposed to focusing on your negative, because as Dav will always say, wherever your energy goes, that is what will grow. So if you're focusing on all the negative things about yourself, then that's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's like that, what do they call it, the monster under the stairs. It's a tiny little thing, but it starts to mushroom and get bigger, and really it's your imagination. You're not controlling your thoughts and staying with reality. You're kind of living from a place of imagination where it's just not true.
So just to finish off this bit, we're just going to say, what are you thinking about? A mental diet is so important. Obviously our food, our exotic Krakti diet is so important for us to stay healthy, but to stay even more healthy and spiritually and physically and emotionally, we've got to be very dhyan to see what are you feeding your thoughts. Are they healthy ones or the judgmental ones? Most of the time we find ourselves, if you pay attention, they're quite, we say unkind things to ourselves, things that we wouldn't say to our child, or but why is it normal? Why is it okay to say it to ourselves and not to people we love? So we're all constantly, berating and we're just being horrible to ourselves sometimes. We can say really quite nasty things to ourselves and we don't realize, but only because habit ban gaya, and it's something we learn from a young age. I'm not deserving of being loved. I'm not deserving of being nice to me, because I just something when I was young, I wasn't held, I wasn't loved, I wasn't, nurtured. So maybe I'm not deserving of being nice to me. It's just that's where we develop the hugs, the belief from that, we're not special. And it all comes back to awareness, thinking about what it is that we're thinking, what it is that we're doing in order to make ourselves feel that way, because it is a conscious stroke unconscious choice, and it is about becoming more and more aware of where it is that you actually want to be in your life, in the state. But don't forget, these are all suggestions as coaches, and we understand that, like I said before, there's therapy, there's medication, there's exercise, there's the food that you intake. All of these can have a really positive effect depending on how you're feeling in terms of your mood. And we understand that low mood, feeling a little bit down about ourselves, is completely normal. You can't have amazingly high thoughts and not have low mood and things like that. That's completely okay. But it's when it goes over 2 weeks or 3 weeks and you know that you can't just shift that, the way you're feeling, it's a heavy feeling, and that's where you understand that you need to go out, get some help, talk to somebody. Talking is very, very powerful, and when you talk to somebody who cares about you and loves you, they will make sure you understand that what you're thinking is just not true. I just had one of my clients this is a couple of months ago, she goes, I find it difficult to stop this negative conversation in my mind. It's because it's when it's something programmed so hardwired, it is hard sometimes. I didn't realize I was probably doing a negative self-talk for the past couple of hours. I didn't realize I was doing it. And I said to her, okay, the simple thing you can do, you can just, you know, if you're going to Malazi job there, whatever, you can do that, but you know, that's why they have that. It's all about repetition. It's all about reprogramming yourself. I said, just keep saying to yourself, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Just keep it simple. Just when you're cooking, when you're walking, when you're showering, just keep saying thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Because then the mind already thinking, well, you only say thank you to something when you got something to be grateful about. That takes you out of that place of when you're not in a judgmental, when you're not, you know, you're not unkind to yourself. You're actually expressing thank you. Just saying that and nothing else, you know, it really helps. And she started to do that, and she did it. She goes, I just find it easier just saying thank you, for obviously the first subconscious mind wasn't familiar with it. It would try and thinking, you know, what are you doing? But
because it's not what it's used to.
But to get a nit is repetition. It's only through repetition that we can reprogram our subconscious mind, which is a habitual mind, we say. So she just kept saying thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, until it became all new habit she developed, and then she found herself in a less situation where she attracted unkind, you know, situations. Oh, just because she said thank you, thank you, thank you.
So the next one is increases happiness. This is about being kind. So being kind and helping others can make you happier. Research indicates that generous people are the happiest. It shows that being nice to others allows you to receive it in return. So, you know, what is it that we can do consciously every day? We can do something that's being kind to ourselves. And we've got so many examples we probably wouldn't have. You know, we would use the rest of the program or even many programs if we were to talk about all the different things they can do. I mean, we were talking about this earlier, one act of kindness radiates out into the universe. We don't know that one act, what kind of impact it's not only going to have on that person, because that person might hopefully carry it forward and think, well, someone's done something so nice to me, I want to do something nice for somebody else. So you don't know how far your one act of kindness is going to go. And it's so important to remember that. And then we were talking about smiling, and you were saying you've done the scientific side of smiling.
Yeah, just simple thing like smiling. When we're smiling, because like I said, our body, however we use our body, it sends signals to our brain. You know, if we like hunch like this, that's sending a signal to our brain that we feel small, insignificant, and then all of a sudden we start releasing stress hormones. That's the message it's telling the brain. But when we're upright and uplifted, we're saying that, you know, we feel good about ourselves, you know, and that's the message you're sending to the brain. So we start releasing good hormones. Just that posture makes a big difference. So smiling, and so when we're smiling, when we the side of the, you know, the lips move up, that's sending a signal to the brain, and that's switching off the amygdala. Amygdala is all about the fight or flight freeze, where it's all about stress, you're under attack. So when we're just smiling, it's telling you to switch that off, and then our body, the immune system, goes into growth and repair, and then releasing all this serotonin. So even that increases happiness just by smiling. So this is how intelligent and wonderful our bodies are. That is always working. You know, if we allow ourselves to use it and in a healthy, natural way, we are allowing ourselves to be kind to ourselves and increase more happiness. And when we're happy, everybody else around us is happy. You know?
I mean, I can use this one quick example. If you go to a function and there's one person, I'm not going to say, you know, and they're making other people laugh, and what's happening, I don't know if you've seen that experiment on the train where somebody's watching a film and they are absolutely laughing their heads off, and everybody else on the train around them doesn't know what they're laughing at, but all of a sudden everybody else is laughing because that person is just in their moment. They're being kind, they're watching what they're watching, but it's bringing up something that's so powerful. And this is what kindness can do. It can create that amazing ripple effect, boomerang effect, where what you're giving out is coming back to you.
Always comes back,
but it's always, you know, sometimes being kind, you're actually being a model for a lot of other people who may not be kind to themselves or don't know how to be kind, you're showing not only your own children but people around you that kindness is always the thing that wins over anything else. You know, you can try and be angry with somebody, you can bear a grudge, you can do so many of the more negative emotions, but being kind, it actually, the result you'll get will be so much better, and everything else can be tried and tested, but you will not get the same response. So kindness has just got that, I don't know, it's got that massively feel-good factor to it.
Oh yes.
And sometimes being kind can mean holding someone's hand. You don't even have to say anything, you don't even have to smile. You might put your arm around somebody and they may not have felt someone's touch for a long time, but that is going to do something to their body, which is automatically going to happen to your body as well.
So just by touching somebody's holding their hand, like I said, straight away it's going to send a signal to your brain, and the brain is saying you are safe. And so when you are safe, then you don't have to be in the fight or flight freeze mode. You're just gone into, your immune system's gone into strength and growth and repair. And all of a sudden, if there is any symptoms or the body needs healing in any way, it will start repairing itself just because just holding somebody's hand. This is all act of kindness. And I just, you know, when we talk about this, you know, even though we've done this for a while, but every time, you know, repeat it, it just feels good inside.
I've got a couple of examples that I mentioned to you earlier this morning, where I went to this Gurdwara, and I'm not going to mention which Gurdwara it is, but the ladies in there, they were so lovely. I don't even, and you could feel the kindness, the warmth. It was, honestly, I mean, we're talking about radiating kindness, but it just felt magical. I mean, sometimes when you go into religious places, they can feel quite cold and uninviting, even though you're going there, you know, to pray and do whatever it is that you want to do when you're there, to connect with yourself more. But these people were so inviting, kind, warm, loving even, that you didn't actually want to leave there, because there was that mutual feeling of kindness of, you know, I went into the kitchen to make a coffee and stuff, and they were like, well, that's over there, just help yourself to this and this. But whereas sometimes when you go into these kind of places, people feel that they've got to be stern and they've got to be a certain way because they've taken on the role of you know, ownership, I suppose, or territorial, whereas there was a real community feel to this. And from that I can understand why people love doing voluntary work, because they're doing something for somebody else, and that person may never be able to repay them, but they're getting so much more out of helping somebody else that then that person, like I said, may never be able to give it. But it's that feel-good factor, it's a kindness, it's doing something for somebody else, and then you naturally feel better because it's lifted your mood. And when you're with somebody whose life situation might be so much more dire than yours was, even if you went there and you're feeling low, but then you realise that actually my life isn't that bad, you know, these people have got it so much more worse, but I feel so much better knowing that I'm helping them on the road to recovery.
Yes, it's a lovely feeling when you're actually doing it from a place of genuine kindness. There's different, your body just feels the whole experience differently from when you're doing it just as a should. You know.
And I mean, when I went to this Gurdwara, I just didn't want to go home. I wanted to, I just thought, what is it? It was palpable. It was, you could feel how loving these women were. So obviously whatever they were doing it together. There was no hierarchy between them. You know, they wanted to make the place so inviting, and I don't know, it was so lovely.
It is, I can truly understand it. So we're going to go on to the next one. I can't believe how quickly the time goes.
I know. We love talking.
We love talking about this, especially the kindness, you know. So how triggers how to experience more pleasure in our lives. That's another act of kindness. So being kind to others triggers your brain, again, it's pleasure and reward centers. And so as you feel good, you know, as you feel as good as you do and you receive that goodness back from the good deeds that you do, there's so much pleasure in that. And pleasure is one of our experiences we're meant to have here, you know, as spiritual beings having a human experience. And pleasure in the sense of the inner child in us, what we love talking about. It's like this world is like a playground, and we're here to enjoy all the goodness and all the fun things and all the pleasures of just like biting into a lovely strawberry or an apple, the pleasure of having a cup of tea. There's so many ways we're here to experience this pleasure, because in the spirit realm we don't have these five senses to enjoy the pleasures of being a human species here. So we are here to act of kindness, it's like we are obviously extensions of God, and God experiencing itself through us, but also want to enjoy these pleasures of these five sensories we have. So we were talking about this, we did a few episodes back, I think it was last year, when we did about the chakras.
Oh yeah.
And we talked about one of the chakras to do with around pleasure, the sacral chakra, but pleasure in creativity. Yeah. Because when we allow ourselves to feel the creativity, because who are we at our true essence again? We are creative beings. We create through our imagination, through just daydreaming, which we somehow being condemned not to do because we are conditioned to think that
waste of time.
But no, that's where all the miracles and wonderful things come into in our reality through our imagination and daydreaming. But there's powerful creativity happening there through our imagination, and that allows us to enjoy the pleasures of this beautiful world. And that's what we come to do, because it's a gift. This life, it's a gift. So pleasure, enjoying, the more we indulge ourselves in the creativity that actually makes us alive, that's where we experience pleasure, and that's where we experience immense kindness to ourselves. And then when we are enjoying that creativity, that kindness is radiated out to the whole of this planet and beyond.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about the triggers, feelings of pleasure, when you're doing something that's creative, it doesn't matter what it is. It can be making a cake, it can be doing a piece of art. The problem I feel in our society, the Western society, is the time. We feel guilty that we're spending time on something that's not recognized by other people. So it's important that if that's something that's important to you, then you must do it, because that is where you're becoming kind to yourself. But who knows what you can create? But it's only through creation you really, really get to know yourself. And when you're creating something, you're in the flow. Now, you may not have heard of that, but when you're doing something, you forget about everything and everyone around you, because you're so focused on doing something that's not only creative, but it's pleasurable. So it's sending all those hormones, into the state of, oh my God, I'm in such a good place now. So you lose all sense of time, your surroundings, because you're doing something you so love. But unfortunately, we don't give ourselves time to do that, or even explore these parts of what we would like to do. But it's a chance, it's an opportunity, to look at what you might want to do. Yeah. And it may not even look like it's creative to other people, but for you, if that's what makes you happy, and you know that you're taking time out of being kind to yourself because that's what you enjoy, then that's the biggest kindness that anybody can do for anybody else.
Yeah, and I find that when we're not in that creative state, we're either thinking about what's happened in the past, or we're thinking about the future, the anxiety of the future, and past is usually something we're depressed about. That takes us out of our creativity, but we end up manifesting whatever we're focusing on. So where the attention flows, the energy flows there. But when we're in that creative state of pleasure, that only happens in the present moment, because we are creative beings, and creativity only exists in the now moment. So when we're doing something on a very creative state, energy, then we end up manifesting that. So it takes us out of the past and future. That's where we experience more pleasure. And when we experience more pleasure, we find ourselves, we have very healthy relationships with everyone, your partners, your children, your parents. When we're in that creativity, in that pleasure center, in the sacral, we have a very harmonious relationships as well.
Yeah, so, if you're somebody that's thinking, well, I'm not creative at all, I'm no good at this, I'm not, look into what you could do. It's just trial and error. Nobody's born, well, maybe a few people have been born knowing what they enjoy, but sometimes the first step is just allowing yourself to have a try at something different. Most people will go to work, come home, watch the TV, eat dinner and stuff like that. That's the normal stuff. But to do something different and separate, that's also a massive kindness to you, and will be honoured and respected by your friends and family once you start giving it a lot of time and effort, and the creativity, the juices will start to flow. But it is about prioritising yourself, and that again, like I've already said, is such an important kindness to you. And when you've done something you enjoy and love, and that could be going to the gym, you feel good, so therefore you can be kinder to the people around you. You're not feeling stressed or angry or depressed or anything, because you've actually taken time out for yourself.
And people you find that who are very creative and really passionate, enjoying pleasure of their hobbies, you find that they don't age quickly, you know, they look younger for their age. You notice that in those people who are, you won't believe that they're a certain age. That's because they're in that moment in that creativity state and enjoying the pleasure. Pleasure keeps you young.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I mean, if we're we're coming to the end of the programme now. But if you were to do something that was kindness to you today on your way home, or not on your way home, but when you get home, what would that be?
I think I would just I just want to treat myself to something nice to eat, I think.
So what would that be?
I think I'm happy with a nice chocolate with a cup of tea. I would.
She hasn't got a really sweet tooth, but
I do. I think I would just treat myself for that.
I think that's nice, just a bit of alone time. Read a book, have a cup of tea, forget about the world, and just dive into that book. For me, that's as good as anything. So we really hope you've enjoyed our programme on kindness and how to improve your life in terms of personal development in this area, but also so much for the people around you.
I think I just want to quickly finish off. Give kindness to those people who needs it the most, the ones that are always constantly berating and hurting themselves. They need more kindness. You know.
And they are the hardest ones to give to. But
thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.